I'm Jack.
And I'm Dawson.
Welcome to the evolution of the two-party system. We're just going to be basically talking about how America created the current political system we have. And so I guess I'll ask you first, Dawson. How did we end up here?
Well, people back in the day, United States, they disagreed a lot on how the country should be run. Some groups liked a strong national government, while a lot of others preferred a stronger state system. And these different groups arguing all the time, they split up and became the Federalists and Democratic Republicans. The Federalists were made by Alexander Hamilton, while the Democratic Republicans were created by Thomas Jefferson. The first party system was from 1784 to 1824, and the fall of the Democratic Republicans.
Why did political parties even form at all?
Well, the U.S. had elections, so many people, they ended up forming groups to try to win them. Many leaders disagreed on what the Constitution meant. Many arguments were held, and to get laws passed, politicians ended up teaming up with the people they agreed with the most.
Why was the two-party system basically unavoidable, and how did Sean Wylance describe this?
He said people in politics and democracy naturally just form groups. I mean, parties give voters the choice to help organize politics. Like, just makes it a lot easier when you can vote in groups. So with all the arguing about the government power, two big sides were bound to form. It was bound to happen.
How did these two big sides kind of coalesce from smaller political groups?
Well, yeah, they used to be small groups, fractions. They started newspapers, writing stuff. They ended up picking their candidates, and they planned it together. And this made them into real political parties down the road.
What kind of big ideas helped cement their power and create these two sides?
Americans kept arguing over pretty big differences they each wanted. Some wanted a big government, some wanted a small government, some wanted their government to help businesses, while the others wanted them to help farmers. Many wanted to be friendly with Britain, while others wanted to just be friendly with France. And a strict versus a loose reading of the Constitution. These arguments and bickers at each other, naturally it just split people into two different sides.
And what documents can we see that kind of show the rise of these political parties?
There were some pretty notable ones. There's the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, George Washington's farewell address, and a lot of earlier newspapers written by people from other sides.
What was the popular consensus about political parties back then?
A lot of people, they didn't like them. They didn't like the ideas at first. They thought parties would just divide the nation, and eventually they realized that parties help organize politics.
Right, like ideas, thoughts, and feelings into actual policies and actual movements. How did Andrew Jackson kind of contribute to the collapse of the Democratic Republicans and help create the modern two-party system we have today?
Andrew Jackson, he divided the Democratic and Republican Party. He disagreed a lot with the elites had to say, or the people with high status and a lot of net worth. He wanted everyone to have an equal voice, no matter your net worth.
How did the federal farmer show kind of an early mistrust of parties?
The federal farmer, he agreed with a lot of what people before the party system was invented and their first look at it. He kind of agreed with them. He thought that they were fighting for power instead of the actual country. He thought it would just split America. They decided to write articles supporting their favorite leaders, and they would attack the other side, encouraging readers to join them in the attacking.
Since the system is kind of built this way, what major events pushed us towards a more two-party system?
Well, there was a lot of main events that were going down during this time. There was Hamilton's economic plans.
Like with the central bank.
Yep. There were treaties with other countries they needed to worry about. There were the election of 1800, the 1824 corrupt bargain, and Andrew Jackson's rise. these all events split people because they agreed or disagreed with each other heavily on these topics.
What belief changes kind of made these two parties stronger?
The Americans, they started to believe that ordinary white men should vote, not just rich people. Voters should choose between clear party choices, making it far easier to vote, and parties should be run by national campaigns.
What brought an end to this first party system that we've been talking about?
Well, the old party, Democrat-Republican, broke up like the Beatles, and Jackson's support, it made the Democratic Party. His opponents, who despised him, ended up just creating the Whig Party. Parties started holding conventions, using different slogans, running big campaigns, making more people vote for them than ever more. And that's how we got our modern two-party system. And it brought about the end to the old one-party system. All right, Jack, it's your turn. I wanted to ask you, how did the divide in the 1824 election give rise to the Democratic Party?
In 1824, the Democratic-Republican Party was split between John Adams, the incumbent Secretary of State, and Andrew Jackson, who was this military leader, a veteran from the War of 1812 and several Indian wars. Along with them was Henry Clay from Kentucky, William Henry Harrison. They all kind of split the vote. Henry Clay kind of sided with John Adams when the vote went to the House, and John Quincy Adams was elected President of the United States. Andrew Jackson, in retaliation, the next election, completely left the Democratic-Republican Party, founded his own, the Democratic Party, and created this sense of popular sovereignty and this massive return to the people's will. So the 1828 election was incredibly nasty. John Quincy Adams' supporters went to deep lengths to attack Andrew Jackson, seeing him as an actual threat to Adams' presidency. They created coffin handbills, which really revolutionized how political speech could spread. Along with this, and the backdrop, was the Second Great Awakening, which saw revivalism, evangelism, kind of conquer a lot of American society. The Protestant Reformation really spread to America once again, which is why it's called the Second Great Awakening. So Jackson's early term was really plagued by tariffs of 1828 and 1832, which Jackson had actually accused Adams of doing. He didn't like his tariffs, and then 4 years later did the same exact thing. That really created a crisis in South Carolina that really did not want tariffs. Created the nullification crisis, where South Carolinians, including the incumbent vice president from South Carolina, John C. Calhoun, announced they were just going to nullify federal law, and Jackson responded by sending in troops. In addition to the nullification crisis, 1832 saw the rise of the Whigs. Led by Henry Clay, they very much so saw Jackson as this tyrannical figure exerting his power over the American people, very similar to King George in the American Revolution. They called him King Andrew I. They created lithographs, they created political cartoons that characterized Andrew as a king.
All right, what did America look like after this King Andrew figure?
Well, along with King Andrew I came the magician, Martin Van Buren. His vice president kind of took up the reins after Jackson decided he wasn't really ready to be president anymore. They ended their administration on this incredibly devious, the Panic of 1837 kind of struck, and the abolition of the Second Bank of the United States kind of made it so that we weren't ready for another recession so quickly. And upon Martin Van Buren's re-election, he lost to the Whig Party, who had ascended to national status after attack after attack after attack on the Democrats, and after failure after failure after failure. Henry Clay was kind of the figurehead of the entire Whig Party, even though he didn't win the nomination. It was another veteran of the War of 1812, William Henry Harrison, Tippecanoe. He only died a month into his term after allegedly contracting a cold during his inauguration. It was just an incredibly rainy day, and he didn't bring an umbrella. His ascendance to the presidency really sparked the beginning of the second party system, along with the Democrats, creating this revolving door between Democrats and Whigs, and then presidents dying in between that really didn't end until the rise of the Republicans. After William Henry Harrison's death, his vice president, John Tyler, came in as a Whig, but he proved to be incredibly divisive.
Now, how did people react to an incredibly unpopular president?
Well, that's just it. He was incredibly unpopular. His own party, the Whig Party, saw this as a betrayal of their values, and they kicked him out. And during the end of John Tyler's tenure, Henry Clay ascended as the 1844 nominee for the Whigs, but unfortunately, he very much so advocated for the spirit of compromise. But when you're a national party and you're trying to compromise your own beliefs, you wind up losing almost every single time, giving in to the other side.
All right. Now, after we won the Mexican and American War and got all these new territories in the West, what became the national focus instead of Mexico?
Instead of Mexico, we really began focusing on slavery. It's been an issue that has been around since the conception of the Constitution. It really divided a lot of Americans along these lines of how we should deal with slavery, whether it be complete abolition, a compromise in our beliefs between both sides, or complete slavery, a system based on forced labor, basically. And this very much so grew from smaller parties forming amidst the kind of downfall of the Whigs during Zachary Taylor and Millard Fillmore's presidencies, with the Liberty Party in Maine, the Free Soil Party, and the Free Democratic Party. Now, along with this rising abolitionist movement came many pro-slavery arguments. One of the ones that has been used throughout all of history, basically, to kind of represent black people as more inferior to the white race is this biblical story about Noah and his 3 sons. In it, Ham sees his father drunk on wine, and he goes to tell his brothers, and they tell their father, and in agreement, his father curses Ham's descendants to all work in the camps and be enslaved to the descendants of the other brothers. Those kind of represent the modern races that we hold today. Ham kind of more represents the descendants that in Africa. Japheth represents the white descendants, and Shem represents more Eastern descendants. And this kind of thinking of the black race is inferior because of the Bible has been incredibly pervasive, especially as arguments for slavery.
Initially, how did the government react to this anti-slavery movement?
Well, leaders like Henry Clay saw this movement, and they knew that absolute abolition would never be achieved. So he tried to tiptoe around it while also finding compromise between the abolitionist side and the pro-slavery Southerners and the Democratic Party. So they created the Compromise of 1850. One such thing in this compromise was the Fugitive Slave Act. It meant that runaway slaves were to be sent back to their enslavers purely for trying to become freed, purely for escaping a system of chattel. And this kind of led to a lot of fights between northern and southern states, pro-slavery and anti-slavery states, and it led to an event called Kansas, Nebraska. It led to a lot of violence in the middle of the United States.
Now, in the wake of the Civil War, how did this extremely pro-slavery government get overthrown by an abolitionist Republican Party?
Well, it really has to do with their kind of overstepping of power. The Dred Scott decision made it so that black men had no rights. They couldn't even sue or get sued because they weren't people. And it was leaders like Abraham Lincoln, Horace Greeley, and William Seward that really stood up and said nobody should ever be enslaved. It was Lincoln himself that said a house divided by itself cannot stand. He took blatant opposition to the failures of the Whig Party and the Democratic Party, and claiming that compromise will only get you so far, but you have to be stern in what you believe. Any type of slavery will result in everybody being subject to another master, no matter who. His calls for absolute abolition really helped grow the Republican Party. By 1859, the Republicans already had a majority in the House, and this kind of led to the Republicans cementing their victory in 1860, really as this national abolitionist party that really represented the end to slavery. And that is really what sparked the Civil War. Southern states seceded because they saw Abraham Lincoln as this massive threat to slavery.
Yep, I had to agree with you there. Slavery is not a good hobby.
Well, that's a really good point. Republicans captured the gaze of the nation, and the South incredibly despised Lincoln and the Republican Party, and they created the Confederate States of America to specifically protect the institution of slavery. When Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclamation, he very much so did it with the intent that slavery has no right to exist anywhere. Upon the South's loss in the Civil War, Lincoln created the National Union Party ticket. It represented this reconciliation between North and South, with both a Northerner and a Southerner, and a former Democrat, Andrew Johnson, as the vice president. Lincoln won re-election because he represented not just what America should be, but what America is, this union between all people. He didn't compromise. He created something that had meaning. He created a new nation that bettered everyone.
Wow, that was very insightful. It showed us from the first party system to the second party system to Abraham Lincoln.
That's right, Abraham Lincoln was a G. Even though the National Union Party ticket fell apart, the Democrats and the Republicans are still the main two parties we have today. And this cycle of one party controlling and then another party controlling, one after the other, has persisted throughout all of history of the United States. It's incredible that we still have a nation unified today, and it's because of people like Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, Alexander Hamilton, and even George Washington. The two-party system is what we have, and it's here to stay.
Thanks for going on this incredible journey with us. I'm Dawson.
And I'm Jack.
And this was the evolution of the first party to the two-party system.